It was late 1970s. Steve was at an office. He was leading a Lisa software division. He had a set of software developers to work where he had to launch for Macintosh. And Steve's vision and the board's vision was quite collapsed, and a lot of conflicts happened at that point of time. So the board director came to Steve's office and told Steve, what you're making your developers do and what the company is facing is two different things. We trust your instinct and we trust your vision around you want to make high quality digital solutions, you want to make high quality devices which normal people also can use it, but the vision of long term versus what short term the company is facing, it is quite apart, and we need to address the short term problems as well. And Steve was completely shut off from the board's vision, and that led a lot of confusion, and the team did not perform as it had to perform. And that led to one problem where Steve was demoted out of the position, and the board decided, Steve, I think you're not fit for leading a team of developers or team of engineers. I think you have to step down and start doing something else. And while this was a setback for Steve, he was just 25 years old and very energetic, wanted to do something in the world, and the board was not aligned for it. He bounced back again. He became head of Macintosh division, but the story didn't end. The story again went back, and then the board again pushed back in a way that Steve was out of the company itself. So Steve was fired from Apple directly. So this was around maybe early 1980s, and the whole journey from that portion, the next decade of the journey becomes super interesting. So before I share, this is Kiran. I am alumni of IIT Kharagpur. I work in Bangalore in a healthcare startup, and I'll be sharing the story around Steve's Metamorphosis. The last couple of book clubs we discussed around how Steve changed as a person and led the company in the later stages, and how the company went through a metamorphosis and become a butterfly after that. So that's the whole idea. Steve was in an era where Pixar and Next was his babies that time, and he was leading those companies. And he got a call from the CEO of Apple in late 1996. It was around November, December. Gil Amelio, CEO of Apple at that point of time. He called Steve back, thinking that Steve can help Apple to bring out of the brink of destruction and the end of Apple as a company. He asked Steve if he has any software where he can actually install in Macintosh and the company and the products the company was building, and then help Apple to revive. And Gil had lost all opportunities. At that point of time, Apple didn't have an even good relationship with Microsoft. So even Microsoft said, no, we don't want to build software for you. And the only option was for Steve to come back and then help them out. While this sounded very interesting, Steve had a lot of grudges for Apple's director because he moved out of it. But the new Steve, revived Steve, was not the old one. He jumped for the opportunity. He in fact set a meeting with Gil Amelio and the board of directors of Apple at that point of time. And he went back to the board, gave an amazing presentation of what Next as a company was building as a software. And in fact, he proposed and influenced the board of directors to buy Next itself. So that led that Next was sold to Apple for around $429 million. Steve took $137 million out of stock options of Apple. And the whole idea was not to just brag he became rich out of that deal, but the thought process for him is to give hope to those engineers who helped to build Next as a computer. And even those engineers were rewarded really, really good. So those engineers also was part of Apple. Now, the next problem comes when Steve entered to Apple as a new face, as a new guy. People were thinking, now again Steve will come and become a CEO. But to be surprised, when Gil Amelio even offered a position of becoming a CEO, Steve denied, no, I don't want a position of CEO. And Steve learned this in the time when he was leading Pixar and Next, that you ought to help people to do what they're best at, rather than searching for a position. And that's when Steve decided, let me not take the position, because the position will demand a lot of activities which he may not be super good at. Rather, he focus what he's best at. And Steve was best at laying down the future and think creative so that Apple can thrive to generations. And that was Steve's mindset. So Steve got back to work. Steve was super excited. Now, the whole problem for the Steve as an advisor was, how do you revive? How do you ensure where the big shark, the Microsoft, was killing the whole PC market, and how do you even come? The first step he took was to restructure the board of directors, and he went to one of his old mentor and friend who was Apple's board of directors, Mark Marpella. The person's name was Mike, and Mike in fact invested Apple late 1975 as Apple was just coming out of the garage. So it was the biggest, one of the toughest conversation Steve had with Mike, that he needed to step down out of the Apple because they want to restructure and ensure the new folks who are coming to Apple and they can make it better. And so Steve went to Mike's home. Mike is a little old father figure to Steve, and Steve has tremendous respect because just because of Mike's guidance and mentorship in the initial days of Apple, Apple was there where it is. And while Steve met Mike, and they went to the home, the conversation was quite interesting. So Mike greeted Steve to his garden, and then they were talking normally. And Steve, without taking a pause, he politely paused and told Mike, "Hey Mike, I need to talk something important to you. And while you're aware of what Apple is going through it, I decided that and I need you to step down of the board. A few of the people like Ed and some other people will stay back, but most of the people have to step down." And Mike, for a second, he paused. The news was very shocking for him, but he asked Steve, "Did you also talk to other board members, going to their home and telling them, or are you coming this from me?" Steve told, "I respect you a lot, and you're the only person I came person to person and giving you this message." And this conversation was a little difficult for him, but Mike, because he was already successful, he was in very good shape in terms of his career, the accomplishment he did. He took up a pause and told Steve, "I think you're doing the right thing. And this was pending since a long time. I think you need to start restructuring the board. But what next? What would you do next?" Steve was very honest. He told, "To be really honest, Mike, I really don't know. I don't know how to even bring Apple out of this big hole. But I'm still figuring out." Steve had his metamorphosis in last decade while with Next and Pixar as a person, but now the time was Apple to become a butterfly. And Mike started having conversation with Steve, and they started brainstorming ideas. In fact, Mike told Steve, Apple has to come out, in spite of knowing that Microsoft is dominating in the PC market. It can actually kill anyone in the industry right now. You have to come up like a butterfly, go into multiple industry, go to some consumer electronics, do something about it. And Steve gave a thought. I think that was the direction of the first seed that came into his mind, what needs to be done next. And while he was figuring out, the first thing came into mind is that while the company itself is confused where the company is heading, think about the consumer, think about the employees, what will happen to them. And that's when he realized he needed to create a campaign where people believe what Apple stands for again, and what are the last decade of lost vision has to come back. And that's when he got an idea that he need to go to the marketing agency, which helped Steve to launch the initial Macintosh ad, which was a huge hit. The first few hits of marketing campaign led Steve a lot of customers to buy Apple products. But in 1984, the product didn't do well. Product was really bad. The tech was not good. So product didn't do eventually good. But this time Steve knew he cannot sell false things to the customers. He cannot sell anything which gonna not stay. He has to be transparent and be very authentic. And that's when Steve came up with an idea. He called to that agency and he told, I want to create a campaign where we build Apple's image back. And Apple stands for challenging status quo. Apple stands for thinking different. Let's do something different. And that led to the eventual campaign called Think Different. I think if you Google and check in the YouTube video as well. The Think Different campaign is one of the best campaigns which any marketing person looks up to revive the brand image. So that was Steve's goal at that point of time. But yes, again, reality hit. And Apple again was struggling in sales. They were not doing well in the market, and they were in a level where they didn't have any proper company who could actually customize Microsoft Office suite into Macintosh. And Bill had taken away the contract, taken away the partnership with Apple because of previous poor relationship management with the Apple's board in the past. And now Steve had to again talk to Bill, call him, and then get him to write and customize Microsoft Office software, which was a game changer and is a need for the market. And this was, I think, late 1997 around, where Steve calls Bill. Interestingly, the conversation, the way Steve does in the past versus now, completely changed. Steve in the past had amazing ability to interact with people who are powerful, who take big decisions, and he always wanted to win the conversation. He always wanted to gain power. So if he feels the conversation is not going to in his favor, he'll just shut down and just go out of the meeting. But now he realized he cannot do that, and in fact, in his experience with the contract between Disney and Pixar, when Disney was super powerful and Pixar has to thrive, he understood and learned the art of negotiating and the point of weakness. How do you negotiate to your favor while you are in a weaker state of situation? And that's when Steve did his proper homework. He figured out how can he leverage that, and that conversation became super interesting. Steve called Bill, and the conversation became direct to Steve, to Bill. Steve told to Bill, I need you to save Apple. Apple is going to die if you don't save. And you don't have to do just for my sake, but I'll also help you removing a patent infringement lawsuit, which is Apple is putting on you for the last few years. And this is the trade-off I will give, so that I'll help you come out of this patent infringement, and you need to help me to build a software Microsoft suite for Macintosh. Bill shared his frustration that, Steve, I would love to do that. I appreciate that you're calling me, but the relationship with Apple was really bad. Last few CEOs created a lot of problems in filing contracts and finances. It was not good, and I am a little fearful to even do that. Steve calmingly on, hey Bill, I'm not Gil Amelio. Gil Amelio was CEO, but I want to make things happen. I want to change the world. Let's work together to change the world for better. That was a conversation, very interesting, and Steve and Bill gave a cringe smile and call, and then, okay, fine, let's change the world. And he agreed. And after that one call, there was multiple calls to ensure those deals have been taken care of. And that's when Steve took up that call, took up the partnership with Bill. And after a couple of years, they launched at Macworld conference. Steve was standing like this, and there was a big screen, just big screen like this. And he introduced Bill to whole world that Microsoft is going to help Apple bring out the fundamental needs around the software and help Apple to thrive. Problem with that message was that people outside hated by Microsoft because they believed they copied their designs, they copied their things, and why even Steve is partnering with Microsoft. And Steve's whole process, he was super clear why he's doing it, because he knew this would come, and it was a very strategic move to him. In fact, bring Bill to this bigger screen and then introduce Bill, how Bill is going to help and how this partnership will help thrive Apple. That conference was not taken completely positive in the crowd, but within the launch of the next Macintosh, the iMac with the Microsoft, the sale plummeted to a next level where Apple never saw that amount of sale which Apple saw. Apple was struggling to become, and that was a game changer. It gave Apple a share of around 30 to 40% in the existing market, but still the game was not over. Apple still had a long way to go, and the next things become super interesting, and I'll share in the next couple of